Today I'm going to summarise the novel Stoner by John Williams. It's not about drugs. It's about the life of a man called William Stoner. The novel begins by summarising Stoner's life, describing how he began as a freshman at the University of Missouri in 1910 and worked his way to teach there until his death in 1956. The narrator outlines how few students remembered him with any sharpness, his colleagues held him in no particular esteem when he was alive, and how to the older ones his name is a reminder of the end that awaits them all. Cool guy. Chapter 1. Stoner is raised on a farm, and at 19 goes to university to study agriculture on his parents' advice. He gets on well enough, but during his second year comes across a required semester of English literature. Stoner's teacher, Archer Sloane, one day asks him to his office. "I note that you switched your program to literature, is that correct?" "Yes, sir. I'm informed by these records that you come from a farming community. Do you intend to return to the farm?" "No, sir. There is, of course, no absolute need for you to leave. You have an excellent undergraduate record, and you could, I'm sure, successfully complete the work for your Master of Arts, after which you'd probably be able to teach." "What do you mean?" "But don't you know, Mr. Stoner? You're going to be a teacher." "Okay, this is getting weird. Can I go now?" Stoner's parents visit for his graduation, and he attempts to tell them of his plans to stay at the university. "I ought to have told you sooner." What I'm trying to say is, I'm not coming back with you to the farm. You got yourself in some kind of trouble? "It's nothing like that. I'm going on to school for another year, maybe 2 or 3. I've seen you get through this evening." "Let me explain." "One explanation later." "I don't know. I didn't figure it would turn out like this." "I know. Will you be alright? If you think you ought to stay here and study your books, then that's what you ought to do. Your ma and me can manage." Stoner returns to his room and stares at the ceiling. This moment works better in the book. Chapter 2. Stoner receives his Bachelor of Arts. Yay! And then it's World War I. Oh. But for the time being, Stoner continues with his studies, and then he completes his master's degree. That was fast. Then he moves to the university, and begins teaching while studying for his PhD. While studying for his PhD, he befriends 2 other doctorate students, Dave Masters and Gordon Finch. The 3 of them start meeting on Friday afternoons, drinking beer and talking. Have you gentlemen ever considered the question of the true nature of the university? While Stoner gets on with Masters and Finch, he doesn't yet consider them close friends. Have you gentlemen considered the ever question of the nature of the true university? He finds himself becoming more and more attached to Dave Masters, who discusses life in a way that fascinates Stoner. Gentlemen, have you ever questioned the considered nature of the university is true? America revealed their intention to intervene in the war with Germany. Thousands of young men signed themselves up for the war, and both Finch and Masters join the army. However, Stoner does not, and in May of 1918 he receives a letter from Gordon Finch, stating that a year after his enlistment, Dave Masters was killed in action. Chapter 3. On the 11th of November 1918, the armistice is signed, and the war ends, and later that month Gordon Finch returns to the university. He takes a position as assistant to the Dean of Arts and Sciences, Josiah Claremont. Stoner receives an invitation from the Department of Arts and Sciences to attend a reception in honour of the returning veterans. Stoner is nervous when he arrives at Claremont's house, and he enters the reception. He spots a young woman with whom he immediately becomes infatuated. He demands Finch introduce her to him. Her name is Edith Elaine Boswick, and they talk in the evening, and at the end of the reception, Stoner asks if he can visit her the following evening. "Can I visit you the following evening?" So he visits Edith at her aunt's house. When Edith and Stoner are together, the conversation is awkward. "I understand you and your aunt are going to Europe in a little while." "Yes. Where will you go?" "Europe. I mean, what places?" "England, France, Italy." "And you'll be going in the spring?" "April. 5 months. It's not very long. I'm only here for 3 more weeks." This is going badly, isn't it? You must forgive me if I've embarrassed you. "Oh no, not at all. I'm having a lovely time." "Well, it's getting late, and look, I'm sorry, okay? May I call on you again in a few days?" "I'm gonna go." In a sudden outburst, Edith tells Stoner all about herself, and Stoner realises that she has had very little expected of her whole life, and has been constantly protected, never developing any independence. During the next 2 weeks, Stoner spends every evening with Edith, and in the week she is supposed to return to St. Louis, he proposes to her. Edith leaves for St. Louis, and later Stoner receives a letter from her, asking him to come meet her parents. "So what do you do, Mr. Stoner?" "Oh, I'm an instructor at the University of Missouri." "Yes. And what do you teach?" English?" "Yes. Is that the only way you respond?" "Yes." Stoner finds that Edith's father, Horace Boswick, is skeptical of Stoner's ability to support Edith and himself, but ultimately concedes. Stoner doesn't have a chance to talk to Edith, and when in the guest bedroom, finds himself contemplating whether he's making the right decision. Chapter 4. Stoner and Edith marry in Colombia and go on their honeymoon. Their honeymoon is a failure, and the first time they are intimately together, Edith covers her eyes and then vomits after it's over. Well, this isn't going well. Then Edith falls asleep. What a chapter! Chapter 5. Stoner soon realises his marriage is a failure, made no more exemplary than by the passage. He knew his marriage was a failure. Edith is resentful of Stoner, putting on a facade when they have visitors, but becoming hateful and withdrawn when they are alone. Stoner continues working at the university, and uses his dissertation as the basis to begin writing a book. It is during this time that Edith decides she wants a child. What? What did you say? "I think I want to have a baby. Don't you think we ought to have one? We've been married for nearly 3 years. I'm glad you want a child, Edith. I hope this will make a difference between us." "Yes. It won't. When Stoner returns home, Edith is waiting for him and ambushes him with a newfound passion. In 1923, Edith gives birth to their daughter, Grace, and as Edith is sick, Stoner must care for her. He falls instantly in love with her, finding the affection he could not show to Edith he could show to his daughter. Not in that way. Please. And he found a pleasure in caring for her that he had not anticipated. Chapter 6. Meanwhile, Archer Sloane is still at the university, and although much older now, he's doing alright. Hello. Then he dies of a heart attack. Gordon Finch is placed temporarily in charge of the English department, and it's up to him to find a replacement for Sloane in the interim. He eventually finds one Hollis Lomax, a PhD graduate from Harvard. He's very short and severely deformed, his body grotesquely misshapen. At home, Edith reveals she's taken a loan of $6,000 from her parents to buy a house, and Stoner reluctantly agrees to this. Stoner and Edith host a party at their new house, and Hollis Lomax accepts their invite. He and Stoner bond during the evening, and Stoner feels a kinship toward him, discovering much about his life. The new house starts to take a financial burden on Stoner, who can barely afford to live from month to month. However, he finds a pleasure in owning his own house and realizes his life isn't too bad. For now. Chapter 7. It's 1927 and Stoner one day receives a phone call. This Bill Stoner? Yes, who is this? You don't know me. Your ma asked me to call. What's wrong? It's your pa. He's dead. I did not see that coming. Stoner visits his mother, and soon after she dies as well. I kinda did see that coming. Then Edith's father commits suicide. I definitely didn't see that coming. What a twist! And my condolences. Stoner is left alone in the house while Edith is gone for 2 months, and for the first time he feels truly happy, dreading Edith's return. Grace is now 6, and he realizes how important she is to his life, and they spend a happy Christmas without Edith. However, Edith soon returns, and both she and Stoner recognize a change in each other. Chapter 8. Edith takes Grace away from Stoner one day, and starts putting more pressure on her to behave in a certain way. Stoner confronts Edith. I don't like what's happening to Grace. What do you mean? Let up on her. Don't drive her so hard. Grace has never been happier, but you really do hate me, don't you, Edith? What? No, that's not true. And to prove that's not true, I'm going to move all of your things out of the office and put them in a tiny corner in the living room, and then I'm going to move them into the sun porch outside, and finally you'll be forced to work at a shared office space at the university because I'm pushing you out of the house you're paying an extortionate amount for and didn't want to buy in the first place. This is going shite. Chapter 9. It's 1931 and an impaired PhD student called Charles Walker asks to be led into Stoner's graduate seminar on the Latin tradition and Renaissance literature. It becomes clear that Walker is out of his depth in Stoner's seminar, and after delaying it, finally prepares to read his dissertation to the class. However, Stoner realizes during Walker's reading that it is being entirely improvised, and so, based on the rhetoric of the Romans, we can provide with a Hellenistic approach to cynicism that the exegesis of the form is not one of style or grammar, but defiant artistic reproach. That was literally nonsense. Stoner confronts Walker after the class and gives him an F. An F? Yes, an F. An F for flip me, that was bad. Chapter 10. Stoner and Lomax disagree on whether Walker should be allowed to continue, and after Stoner's attempts to prevent him, Walker still manages to find his way onto the program. Lomax grows hateful of Stoner, and after being appointed chairman of the department, gives him an awful teaching schedule. Chapter 12? We can skip chapter 11, trust me on this. Stoner is approached by a student from his riveting seminar on the Latin tradition and Renaissance literature, Catherine Driscoll. She asks if he'll read her PhD dissertation and offer his advice. He agrees and sees Catherine often over the following weeks, soon becoming infatuated with her. Eventually he becomes frustrated and reveals his feelings. I didn't want to cause you the discomfort of having to deal with my feelings for you, which I knew sooner or later would become obvious if I kept seeing you. I felt that nothing good could come of this except awkwardness for you and unhappiness for me. It seemed to me impossible that you could feel for me anything. Shut up and come over here. Chapter 13. Stoner and Catherine begin an affair. For the first time in his life, Stoner is happy, and he realizes Catherine is the first person with which he feels real love. During the holidays, they're able to spend a week together in a remote cabin, and Catherine remarks on the importance of their time together. Bill, if we never have anything else, we will have had this week. Eventually, Lomax discovers the affair, and implicitly threatens to fire Catherine if Stoner doesn't break up the relationship. The relationship ends, and Catherine leaves the university without saying a word. Stoner is grateful she left him no final note to say what could not be said. Chapter 15. Stoner is now in his late 40s, and one day at home he hears Edith scream and discovers her on the floor. What is it? What happened? He turns to Grace. I'm pregnant, father. He sends Edith to her room and then speaks to Grace. Why don't you tell me about it? There isn't much to tell. I'm pregnant. Are you sure? Yes. Well, you aren't to worry. Everything will be alright. I'm sorry, father. It was stupid. He was a little drunk and we didn't take precautions. Do you love this boy, Grace? No. Edith decides that Grace will marry Ed Fry. Yes, now I finally get to be a character. They move to a small apartment in St. Louis. 2 months after they are married, Ed Fry enlists in the army, and after 6 months he's dead. Come on now. Then in June 1942, Grace gives birth to a boy and names it Ed. Edith tries to convince Grace to come back home, but she does not. Chapter 16. Stoner is now in his 60s and begins to feel pain, and becomes tired very easily. He visits the doctor. Well, your blood count's down pretty low, but there doesn't seem to be any infection there. Your sedimentation is subnormal and your blood pressure's down. With the symptoms you've shown and from what I can tell from these, we've just got to go in there and see what we can find out. It's cancer then. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's cancer. When would you want to operate? Within the next 2 to 3 days. Stoner talks to Finch before retiring, and then he has surgery. Now Stoner is dying, and in his last moments he picks up his only published book before he drops it to the floor as he dies. What a story!